Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Teams Talks. I'm David Powers, Assistant Director of Internships with UTA's Career Development Center. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. A reminder of our goal. Our goal for this event is to introduce you to one of our Mavs Edge internship partners and to discuss a topic that is relevant to your professional development. And I'm joined today by Shawn Elder. Shawn is a Chief Operating Officer with Mavs Edge partner ClientWise. How are you doing today, Shawn?
Doing great, David. It's great to be with you here today.
Today is the day after Valentine's Day, so I have to ask, how's Valentine's Day? How was your Valentine's Day?
Well, I'll tell you, David, I've been married to my wife. We're on year 31 now.
Oh, wow.
And so our Valentine's Day, the only thing that she really likes these days, just as long as I remember to bring home chocolates. And I did just that. And so she was happy. So that's all good. And then we watched the final episode of the TV series that we're watching right now. So
see, that's a nice.
That was our night.
I mean, that's a nice night. To me, that's a nice night. I quit observing Valentine's Day several years ago. But there's always next year, I guess they say.
That's right.
But I had a similar night. I had one of the better Little Caesars pizzas I've had in a while, and watched a few episodes as well. Glad that you had a good day. I hope everyone that is watching also enjoyed Valentine's Day. Today we're going to be talking about not how to be successful on Valentine's Day, but how to be successful on your first day on the job. To have success from day one, either in your internship or your full-time position. But before we get into the topic, I wanted to give Shawn an opportunity to talk a little bit more about ClientWise and what you do there, Shawn.
Okay, great. Yeah. So at our core, we are a business and leadership coaching and consulting company. We've got a passion to help financial advisors in the wealth management industry, help them build enduring firms. And when our founder and CEO, Ray Sclafani, decided to form the company back in 2006, he noticed a lot of advisors who are really good at supporting their clients. They support their clients to build wealth. What they really struggle with, though, is how to run a business, how to build a company that lasts beyond themselves. And so we're a small company of about 25 coaches. We've got a core team in our sales, marketing, operations area of about 15 people. And this is really exciting for me to be here because while we've had interns in the past, I'm currently working to stand up a more formal internship program, and the relationship that we have with y'all there at the university has been incredibly helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to hear it. Yeah, and really interested to talk to you about today's topic. Of course, I know I've already shared with you that I stalked you pretty heavily on LinkedIn and was very impressed, with your LinkedIn bio. Have a wealth of information to share with students today. So excited to dig into that with you. But before we actually get into some questions about, specifically how to be successful in an internship or a full-time position, I'd love to hear more about your career path. And I think students can gain a lot from understanding how you maybe moved from position to position and what you did specifically you thought that was successful, in helping you move through those roles.
Okay, yeah, great. Well, I'll tell you, just at the start, my career has been a bit of a winding road. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and probably didn't until maybe the last 5 to 10 years. So for most of my career, I've just been, kind of making it up as I go. I've been very fortunate, and the one thing before I get into the specifics of how my career is kind of winded down the road, something that you just said is what helps to make you successful. And as I think about my career, I think it's just it's hard work, it's determination and perseverance. Because if you're like me and you really don't know what you want to do, when you grow up and you graduate and you're uncertain, it's okay. That's okay. If you get into your first job, it's just a matter of working hard, being the best that you can be, adding value, and then opportunity presents itself. So, when I started after college, I got into a risk management role. I was an internal auditor. And then that led into down the line several risk roles. So I've led an IT risk office. I've led some operational risk teams. But then, after my internal auditing job, I found myself in IT. And that was back in the 90s when the tech boom was happening. And I was a project manager. So learning how to take something that's really vague, bring some definition around it, rally a team around it, and deliver value to the organization in the terms of software at the time. And so anyway, so I had some years in project management. I found myself leading a process engineering team after a few years. And I had no business at all leading that team. But I was leading some Six Sigma black belts and a bunch of different really highly qualified people. And I had never done any process engineering. But anyway, so I had the opportunity. I dove in. I learned a lot about what it takes to engineer great process, and just had some incredible experiences in that role. And then finally, before I got here, I had led some operational teams at JP Morgan. And so when I came here, it was just a great opportunity to have a really broad role in helping to run the company. And it's nice working for a really small, agile, entrepreneurial team, a company. Coming out of the big corporate grind that I had been in for most of my career, and I'll tell you, there are pros and cons of both sides. I love what I'm doing now. There are some challenges, no different than challenges that I had in a big company. Well, the challenges are different, but you will always experience challenges, and it's your ability, kind of going back to what I said, it's your ability to persevere through that I think will define your success in your career.
Yeah, you mentioned something that really struck me about, I don't know exactly how you put it, so I'm gonna rephrase it a little bit. You said had no business leading those teams, right? You were in a position where as a young professional, you were leading teams that, maybe you lacked a little confidence or experience, in leading those teams. And that, I think that's a position that we all can relate to. I say personally, obviously, I can relate to that, being in a leadership position at an early age. And I know a lot of students in their first role, whether they're in a leadership position or not, there's this element of or sense of maybe imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? Can I do this? Right. And I don't think students understand how common that feeling is, but we all experience. I just wondered if you'd like to talk a little more about, what that was like being in a position of leadership before maybe you felt like you were ready to.
Absolutely. Well, a couple of general points that I'd like to make. Number one, yeah, if you're feeling that imposter syndrome, that you're not worthy, that you're not capable, number one, you're not alone. Number two, I've had that feeling every single role I've come to. So every time I've changed roles, when I went from risk management into project management, back into risk management, to process engineering, to operational leadership, to now a COO, I consistently find myself self-reflecting on, gosh, am I actually capable of doing this? So you're not alone. And quite frankly is why I think being here right now in a coaching company is so impactful, at least for me, because I know that the power of coaching is incredible. Find somebody who can help guide you, whether that's your manager or whatnot. But yeah, so David, specifically, as I found myself in that space of leading a process engineering team, it was one of these circumstances where I had proven my value in a different role.
Right.
And they tapped me on the shoulders to take a struggling team that was struggling to add value in a process engineering capacity and to help bring better value to the organization. And so when I start leading the team and I have no credentials, I have no qualifications, and the team's looking at me and
Right.
some know me and they love that. They're like, yeah, great, Shawn's here, he can lead us.
Right.
And other people who had been there ages and they're thinking, wait a minute, why did I get passed over? And so navigating through those team dynamics is a challenge, such a challenge. But
Yeah. Well, I was having chills. You could probably see it on screen. I had some flashbacks. You were talking about standing in front of that group,
Yeah.
for the first time. Whether you're a teacher standing in front of a classroom. I remember specifically being a coach, basketball coach in the huddle. And everyone's looking at you, like you said, for the answers. What do we do now? Where am I supposed to be? Yeah, and again, it's so important. I know students look at polished professionals or people in their workplace who've been in a role for 20, 30 years or 10 years, 5 years. But we all started in the same place,
That's
essentially. Right. And I think it's a great point that you make that it won't be just one time for you in your career. More than likely, you're going to feel that way multiple times each time you change roles or move up or move to a new organization where you're unfamiliar with the culture or the leadership, or you have to develop new friendships, partnerships, relationships. You restart that process in a lot of ways. Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
I know the question I get from a lot of students is generally the general question is, how do you make a good impression?
Yeah.
How do I make a good first impression? How do I make a good first impression at the fair? How do I make a good first impression in the interview? In our case, we're talking about how do I make a good first impression in the workplace, my first day in the position or on the job? So could you talk a little bit about some advice you would offer students for, really making a solid, impactful first impression in day one and that first week, maybe in that first week?
Yeah. Yep. I think it starts with a coaching question, which is, who do you want to be known for? And maybe a different question, what impact do you want to have? And so, I think there are maybe some timeless truths for making a good impression. I think it starts with being on time. And you have to reflect on that old saying of, hey, actually, you're not on time unless you're early. And so if you think about that, maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 2 minutes. But if you show up and you're on time, that's a great first start. Another thing I'd offer up is just mind how you're showing up in terms of how you dress. You've got to obviously make sure you know the environment you're getting into, what's the culture of the company you're going to, and look the part. You don't have to conform. Not everybody has to be the same. We're all different, and that's all great. We're all unique, and that's a beautiful thing. However, if you're going into a professional environment and everybody else is wearing suits and you show up in shorts or jeans, probably not a good thing. And so again, it might not even be a bad thing. It just goes back to the question, how do you want to show up? Who do you want to be known for? Another truth that I'd offer up is this whole notion about being humble. So while we all have skills and gifts and perspective that we bring to the table, just remember, you're not the smartest person in the room, and nobody is. And it's not about being the smartest person in the room. And so if you bring your ego to the environment, I'll just tell you, having worked in professional settings my whole career, ego can kill a team. And so that humility of coming to a table and saying, you know what, I'm not all that and then some. I've got work to do. I've got things I can work on to be better. And if I'm humble enough to recognize that, I'm likely to be more accepting of feedback that I'm going to get. I'm likely more prone to self-reflect and to think about how I can present myself better in the environment. And then finally, before I pause, be a team player. Figure out what you can do to help others, and others meaning anyone and everyone. It doesn't matter who it is. Like, make it hierarchy agnostic. Just remember, it's a small world, and somebody you help will likely pay dividends down the road, because that somebody might know somebody else who's really important, and that message will get to them that, hey, by the way, David helped me out. He did the following thing. It was so nice, and I didn't even ask for it, or whatever it is. That will get around.
Yeah, great suggestions. I wanted to go back and touch on one that's should be, I think, simple. And I've read a lot on success and what makes a successful company. And when you read about successful individuals, the asset that they are it's most precious to them is time. They don't have a lot of time. They're very conscious of their time.
Yeah.
So I just want to reiterate what you said about being on time. If you're late, if you're 3 minutes late, if, as you said, you're on time, to some professionals, especially high-level professionals who every minute of their day is scheduled, you're late and you disrespected. You disrespected, and you showed a misunderstanding of the value of time, and your level of professionalism, just by being late. And it should be a simple thing for us to be 10 minutes early, just in case something comes up on the way. We talk about that in interviewing, but I think that's a great point, and that should be something we can all do, or figure out a way to do, to make a good first impression.
Yeah, and David, I just add on to that. While being on time might seem trivial, so let's say you show up a couple of minutes late. Okay, whatever. You're here at 8:02 instead of 8 o'clock. Fine. Generally speaking, you're on time. Okay, that's great. However, it's little things like that over time add up to something bigger, and it demonstrates an aspect of the quality of your character. And if, again, you want to be known for somebody who is adding value and contributing and is deserving of promotions and bigger and broader roles, or more money, or whatever it is, little things like that really do matter.
Right. And if you work in an extremely collaborative environment where everyone is starting things are getting started at a specific time, and you're preventing the team from moving forward and getting started, that happens. It can happen just in a couple of minutes. So I just think that's a great tip, and I think that's something that's undervalued these days. As you said, it seems trivial, I think, to some folks, but critically, I think it can be critically important in terms of the impression that you're forming. So That's a great point. And something else that you mentioned that I'd love to talk a little more about is culture, company culture. I think this is such an interesting topic because companies spend tons of money on consultants trying to understand their own culture and how to build a culture, how to change a culture. We talk about culture a lot, and we tell students that, you have to determine whether you're the right fit for the culture. Well, how do you do that? How do you do that? What is it? It's kind of it's a little bit elusive and hard to define. And I guess it differs depending on the company, but just your thoughts on, getting a sense of a culture before you start, or what goes into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, to get a sense of the culture, it starts from the very first interaction. And by the way, that interaction might be you surfing the web and taking a look at their website, or taking a look at how they framed their job description, their job posting. But it also more materially becomes apparent from the first interaction you have with them, the first conversation. Maybe they do some job screening, the first interview. You can ask questions in your mind. Are they organized? Is there a defined process for interviewing and bringing, in this case, interns on board? And the reason that's impactful is if they don't have a process, if they're not organized, well, that's indicative of a potential culture that you might find yourself in, and that culture might be defined as chaos if they're not organized. So that's always something to pay attention to. Another thing that'll help guide your idea of the culture is, are they present with you during the interview? And what I mean by that is, you can always tell when people are distracted. Maybe you're in a conversation and they're looking off, or they're clearly in their mind, and they didn't hear what you said. They're not actively listening, because you can tell by the engagement, you can tell by the conversation, that they're just not present. And it is really easy. I'll just tell you from this side of the coin that it's so easy to be so distracted by all of the emails and the texts and the instant messages. And I've got 1,000 meetings on the calendar. So it is very easy to be distracted. But for something so important as talent acquisition, talent management, that is such a critically important factor of company success, that if I'm not committing the time and energy to engaging with somebody to evaluate whether they'd be a good fit here and be able to add value, then again, it's indicative of potentially a broader cultural problem that you would find yourself in if you can tell during the interview that even the interviewer is not present.
Great points. And it just made me think of an instance where I've had students so disappointed that they didn't feel like their interview went well, and I'd ask them a bit about the interviewers, and what that was like. So, well, maybe they were late. Maybe they didn't communicate well to set up the meeting.
Exactly.
As you said, maybe they weren't organized, and the students really disappointed that they didn't get offered the opportunity. And I said, you may have dodged a bullet. You don't understand.
Right.
Is that really a place you want to be? Are you going to be happy there in that culture? Is that a good fit? Why are you? I understand we all want that opportunity, but like I said, you potentially could have dodged a bullet.
For sure.
Yeah.
I also think that you can, if I'm evaluating another company and I want to make sure I dodge a bullet, I might read some insights and reviews. Do some Google searches. Do they have any Google reviews? Do they have information on Glassdoor? You can gauge how different interviewers, if you're fortunate enough to have multiple interviewers, you can gauge how they might answer the question of how would you describe the culture there, and see if they've got massive distinctions between how they describe the culture to where maybe there's not a culture because they're so diametrically opposed in their
Right.
answers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Research, in an internship, you utilize former interns at that, with that organization. We're always encouraging students to use LinkedIn to reach out and make connections. Reach out to students who've been in those roles, and do a little informational interview with them.
Right.
What was your experience like? How would you describe the culture? Was it a good fit for you? Especially it's especially interesting, I think, speaking with someone in your peer group. I know that they may see their experience differently than I might judge that environment. We're going to see it differently, probably someone from my generation and from theirs in terms of what they value and maybe what their expectations are of a role. So doing your research, absolutely online, utilize contacts. And that's something else that I wanted to jump into is networking and just networking really in general. I mean, we talk all the time about, we hear that we throw out the statistic that 80% of positions are filled without even being advertised and some of those sorts of things. And we harp all the time, network, network, network. You've got to meet people. You've got to join clubs and organizations. I know that's difficult for a lot of people. Half the population are introverted and they would rather do anything than be in a room full of people they don't know and have to introduce themselves. So what are some tips for meeting new people or developing your network within a company? I mean, I know one of the things I preach about with an internship is it's a chance to develop a professional reference. Just make some professional contacts.
Yeah.
What would be some of your advice around that?
Well, okay, I'm an introvert by nature, and it is hard for me to build those relationships. And so if you're like me and it is tough for you to develop those relationships, you just have to be intentional, I think. And so for me, I had to force myself into situations where I wasn't comfortable. And so instead of saying, no, I'm not going to go to happy hour, I would force myself and say, no, I've got to do this. This is actually pretty important. I've got to focus on building relationships. Wherever you can get an invite to more social type of avenues within the company, just take advantage of that. If the company's having a volunteer day, go volunteer. Be with everybody else and make sure you're visible and known. Right. You don't have to be the one doing all of the talking. I quite frankly surround myself with people who are more collaborative, people who are more outgoing and the extroverts, because, well, selfishly, then I don't have to do the talking.
Right. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I might suggest is, goes back a little bit to what we were talking about with making yourself stand out. Mm-hmm. It is so much. You're right, David. It's so much about who you know and how you can make connections that way. If you stand out in a role, if you make a name for yourself, you are naturally going to help yourself down the road. I'll tell you, most of my jobs, most of them, all but maybe two, have come from me really working hard to be the best at whatever role I was in and making a name for myself, and others recognizing it. And if I do a good deed for somebody else and I'm in that helpful zone where I'm helping other people, and maybe I'm doing that beyond my role. If I really lean into that and I make a name for myself, I don't have to be the extrovert. I just have to do good work and add value. And then that gets recognized. And then people tell other people, hey, you got to go check out Shawn. He's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's a great challenge. It's a challenge for, I'm off the charts introverted. If you want to use an assessment, it always surprises people because I have to kind of flip a switch at work
Yeah.
When you put on a different persona, I don't want to say it's acting necessarily, but you just have to switch, kind of always just refer to it as like flipping the switch. And it can be exhausting for people who are introverted, who need that time to recharge if they're peopling all day.
Yep.
I know that you probably can relate to that. So I know that that's a great challenge, and finding a position that fits your personality or adjusting your personality a bit to fit the position. I know that's a big challenge for young professionals. And you mentioned a couple others that I really want to address. I'm excited to talk about. One, you mentioned happy hours. That's a challenge in the field that I work in. That's a challenge I've not had to deal with a lot. As starting as a high school teacher, we didn't do a whole lot of happy hours, and staff wasn't going out a lot. But I found that in a lot of companies and a lot of cultures, that's an expectation. There may be alcohol on the premises. There might be, they might drink through I know in some places they drink through the day. It seems wild to me to talk about that, but I know students are going to encounter those kinds of things. So how do you deal with, the after hours behavior and after hours expectations? And then the other thing I wanted to address before we get to a place where we want to wrap up is supervision, being in a supervisory role as a young professional. But thoughts on how to navigate after hours behavior and expectations?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I'll tell you, having worked in an environment, I've actually had two separate environments where we had alcohol on premise. And I'll just tell you from others' experiences, not my own. I was good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Others' experiences, you just have to use your good judgment. And even if you don't have any on site and you don't have to worry about that, if you're at a company event, just think about the notion that you are representing the company. And as a representative of the company, again, how do you want to show up? Who do you want to be known for? Mm-hmm. And I think if we just use good judgment, maybe that second, third, fourth, fifth drink, maybe that's not such a good idea. And look, I use the cheater method. I get a tonic water with a lime, and it looks like I'm having a vodka tonic.
Right.
So, it's not like I don't drink, and it's not like I might not have one or even two at a company event. But I'm certainly going to space it out. And if let's say I'm using that method, I'll have a vodka tonic. I'll have some tonic water with lime, so it looks like I'm still, socializing and engaging, and anyway. And then the other thing is, don't feel like you have to.
Right.
And even if you're not a drinker, let's say you don't drink, that's okay. Maybe instead of saying, well, I'm not going to go to that company event because I don't drink, maybe say, well, I'm going to go to the event because I want to, engage with others. I want to build those relationships. Just don't feel like you have to. I think there's so much. I think we fortunately have grown as a society. We clearly have a lot of work to do. I get it. But I think there's so much grace out there, more so than ever. If people are in a certain space where, like in that case, I don't, somebody that doesn't want to drink, well, yeah, you might get some judgment, but let it go. Who cares? They're probably not worth your time if they're judging you. The people you want to be associated with are the ones who aren't going to judge you, and who you can have a good conversation with and still be yourself, because you don't want to drink. I'm just still sticking on that example, but right. Hopefully you can appreciate just be cautious of your internal dialogue, and whatever's stopping you, whatever's preventing you, think it maybe a little bit different way and say, well, what if I leaned into it? What if I did get out there? And then if you do enjoy a beverage or two every once in a while, just monitor yourself, pace yourself. Just know like most of us have been there, done that. And unfortunately, I am among those who have been there, done that, where I've had too much. I fortunately have never done that at a work event. You just got to remember, what do you want to be known for in your career, and realize that it could drastically impact your standing at work. I've had to walk people out because of situations,
Wow.
and it's not fun at
Yeah.
all. Being on the managerial side,
Right.
it certainly was an embarrassing thing for the employee. News travels fast. You just got to
Right.
know that whatever you do, it could haunt you.
Right. Yeah, really great stuff. Really like the point of not excluding yourself, like you said, knowing your limitations, obviously setting some limits going in, and then also always remember that you are still forming that first impression,
Yeah.
so and like it or not, it is the things that we see from people early on that sets that impression in our minds. Once that's set, it takes a little more effort to change it than it does to set it initially. So, it's something to kind of to think about, when you're in those situations, because it's going to happen. I mean, it more than likely, it's
Yeah.
going to happen. Or you'll be in a similar situation where you have to make that kind of decision. Is it worth it to be here, or should I, what should I do in this role?
Yeah.
And then I think an even tougher, well, I'll say even tougher, but an equally challenging position to be in is when you're supervising. You're in a supervisory role as a young professional, and I'll share a quick example. When I was teaching, I at that time, obviously early 20s, I would have parent-teacher conferences, and they would start the conference by saying, "I thought you were one of the students." So immediately you feel like, that would be a compliment now. I would love for somebody to
Yeah.
say that now. But it's like, at that time, well, I have no credibility. You feel like, well, I'm not going to have any credibility at all with these folks when I have to tell mom and dad that Johnny is not, bad things. I'm going to have to deliver some bad news.
Yeah.
That's not really how you want the conversation to start. And as a coach, um, I went back to my hometown high school to teach, and I was coaching guys that I'd run around with some socially. So that relationship had to change,
Yeah.
and I was going to be making them do things they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And that's a really difficult thing, dealing with the isolation and a sense of not being accepted, by
Yeah.
peer groups, is really, really tough. But would you care to talk about, I know you said, you've been in those kinds of positions. Any advice you'd have for young professionals that find them maybe supervising folks who are their peers or even older?
Yeah.
Some
Well,
cases.
so I'll tell you a great example. I was also in my 20s and found myself leading an IT risk office, I think information security. So number one, I didn't have the credentials to even do that. Number two, I had in before I got that post, it was when I was in project management, and I was friends with a few of the folks in the team that I was now managing, and a few of them were much older than I was. And so not only did I have friends that I was now managing, some of them were older than I was. And David, I'll just tell you, it's one of those things where you just have to persevere through. There are a couple of maybe good tidbits to share. One of which is um, uh, just be careful of taking things personally. Leadership, they say, is lonely at the top. There's some truth to that. And, when you're friends with people versus when you now are responsible for a function, and you have to be the one to make decisions, your relationship does have to change, and your prior friends or the people that are reporting to you, that your interactions are gonna change, and whatever that comes out to, just be careful of taking things personally, because you will likely be talked to in a much different light. People will not be friendly with you anymore. And I'll just tell you my personal story of it. I feel really bad for the people I managed because I didn't do a good job.
Right.
To be perfectly honest, I struggled and I struggled and I struggled. And I got some great advice. I got some great mentoring, and I persevered through. And so as you find yourself in those situations, again, find somebody or some people who can help you through it. And the people who are not on your team, just make sure you get some truth tellers out there who you can talk with. Because you'll come across some situations and some scenarios that are going to be really tough to manage through. And so long as you get that support, you'll be just fine. And quite frankly, even if you don't get the support, you'll still be just fine. Just work through it, do your research on your own. If you don't have that support from somebody, and it'll be fine.
Yeah. Redefining that relationship is so hard. It's so difficult, and in a lot of cases it requires distance. Some distance. And setting some boundaries, which is also very hard, right? And then being consistent, with those boundaries once it's established, so that you're not, because as a leader you can't. As you know, and I'm saying this to the students, you can't waffle back and forth. It's difficult to play both sides of the fence, right? Once you've set the boundaries and you become consistent, it's hard to hop back and forth from the friend role to the leader role. Really, really difficult to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are people who are able to do it, who have the personality to do it, but I'd say, just generally speaking, that's tough to do.
It is. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. While we have a moment before we start to wrap things up with the five burning questions, I wanted to open it up if we have any students who, through the discussion, have any questions that have come to mind that they would like to address. Feel free. I mean, that's why we're doing this in this format. Feel free to unmute, and if you're able to share your video, if you want to come on camera and share your video, we would love to see you and hear from you. But does anyone have any questions? I have a million if you don't, but we'll give some awkward wait time for any student questions while you're fumbling with the mute button and that sort of thing.
And by the way, y'all,
right.
Judgment-free zone.
Right.
Ask whatever you want to ask. The only stupid question is one not asked.
Right.
So no dumb questions. And if you're like me, you might have to force yourself to ask a question. Right. Because you might be that introvert who just doesn't want to put yourself out there. Just go ahead. It's all good.
Well, I'm going to keep an eye on our guest list to see if we see anyone unmute or pop up. But in the meantime, to be respectful of time, I'm going to jump into these questions, because this is one of my favorite parts of the Teams Talks sessions. Is what was your first job, Shawn, or dream job when you got started?
Well, okay. So when you said what was your first job, my first job was picking cherries from a cherry orchard in Montana.
Wow, interesting.
Not my dream job.
That's why I love these questions. Yeah. I always like to give you an option if you want to go dream job. Some people don't have a dream job, so I love that though. I'm glad that's really interesting. Yep.
Yeah, and if I was able to, my dream job would be a race car driver.
Okay.
hmm
Okay.
I love going fast. So, there's that. I'll tell you, David, I touched on this at the beginning, but I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just kind of, rolled with it. But I tell you, now I have just such passion, and this is really odd to say because of my entry into management and leadership was so hard. It was such a struggle for me. And by the way, first management job I got after a year, I was so miserable. I asked to go back to an individual contributor job. And as I talk about persevering through, then they forced me into a different management jobs. Anyway,
Wow.
it was,
Thanks for, yeah.
it
Thanks
was,
for sharing that. Yeah, that's really, yeah, that's interesting. Like I said, I know a lot of students can relate to that. As we talked about, you don't know what the role is until you're in it,
yeah,
right? Really, it's
yeah,
hard to get a sense of a role until you're in it.
that's
Who or
right.
what's been most instrumental in your career development, would you say?
I have been fortunate to have a couple of what I call Yodas
Oh,
in my career. I've had just some really wise, patient, grace-filled leaders who took the time to sit with me and guide me and coach me. And and so anyway, I've been really fortunate to have a couple of those along the way. Dick Daniels is one of the guys that comes to mind. He was our CIO at Capital One, and the guy was absolutely amazing. Just a master at guiding others.
yeah, we strongly encourage students to identify a mentor or reach out, to develop those kinds of professional relationships. We have a mentoring program here at UTA that matches students with possible mentors in their area of interest, field of interest. Can't recommend that highly enough to have someone help guide you through things.
Yes,
So important. I mean, it's so important. That's how we all, I mean, again, when you study the habits of successful people, they have folks who've helped them,
that's
right?
right.
Who've mentored them. It's a key. I think it's a key in your
And then Dave,
development.
I
Yeah.
just say take the initiative.
Mhm.
Don't be like so many of us where we just sit back and wait and hope that somebody might come along. If you find somebody who is like a Dick Daniels, take the initiative. Go ask them, hey, would you mind being my mentor? And if you don't have the time, I respect that. Do you have somebody else
Right.
who, like you, is really good at guiding others? People want to help. And so you might get a no, or you might get a I can't. However, I have somebody else who I have in mind who would be great to support you.
Yeah, that's awesome. What would you say was your greatest failure and what'd you learn from it?
Gosh. I'd say probably that instance I was talking about where I struggled in my first management job. I feel like I failed. And y'all, I got feedback directly from the people. They told me how bad I was. And
So
I
it wasn't
invite
just it wasn't just you.
give me all the feedback, and they did. and it was hard, and I wanted to go home and cry every night, but that's okay. Anyway, I think through that experience, I had enrolled in some management training classes, which for me, because of I don't know how I learned. They weren't really all that impactful, the management training, but it's little seeds, it's little nuggets. You've got to go through those motions to get whatever you can from everybody. And then if you take nothing but what I'm about to say from this conversation, pay attention to this. Be vulnerable. Because if you're not vulnerable and you don't share with at least somebody else, your mentor, your manager, your whomever it is, your truth teller, if you're not vulnerable and you don't tell them what's on your mind and how you're feeling, you can't just tell them what you think. You have to share how you feel. And that vulnerability really is so impactful to enabling somebody to support you, to enable somebody to give you the right guidance, the right feedback, the right coaching. And if you're not vulnerable, the support you'll get will be, I think, superficial, and I don't know that it'll support you as well.
And the last question is, what's the best piece of advice you've received?
Best piece of advice, work hard. Plain and simple, just work hard. If you put the effort in, they tell you the 10,000 hour rule, you'll be incredibly proficient, a master, if you spend 10,000 hours doing something. And while, okay, fine, we can argue the point, but the sentiment is true. If you spend enough time doing something, you will become a master. Well, if I put in, let's say 5 hours a day, it might take me how many years to become a master. But if I put in 15 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever it is, I will become a master that much faster. And so it's just, work hard and then be a good person.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I've had a lot of fun, and thanks for sharing your time with our students. Before we wrap things up, and end, is there anything else you would like to share or?
No, well, actually, yes. Get ready for the journey. Be open and willing to just explore and, let your career take you where you want to go, whether you have a plan or not. But enjoy the journey, and hopefully I look forward to talking with you all someday.
Yeah, thanks again. And speaking of talking with students, in the comments section, you'll see we have ClientWise information, the LinkedIn Handshake account, website links are all available there. Shawn has been gracious to provide his LinkedIn URL and email as well. My contact information is there. And if you're looking for an internship now, we've got some steps to help you begin that internship search in the chat. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And thanks again, Shawn. Best of luck to you at ClientWise.
Okay. Thank you. Great being with you.